Hi everyone, we are here with 4 affordable, fun cars because in this day and age, they're kind of a rarity, and who doesn't want a treat now and again? Now that being said, this isn't an exhaustive list of affordable fun cars in this price range. We've just really focused on cars with a small footprint, but big fun.
Right, and it's not meant to say, hey, we're going to pick the best car for $30,000 to $40,000 in this particular segment or that particular segment. Rather, we're just going to look at what makes these cars fun and kind of share that experience with you.
So we acknowledge that people who are buying a Mini probably aren't also cross-shopping an MX-5, and that's okay. We're here to judge these cars in their own fun ways, and then afterwards, we'll figure out which is the funnest fun car. Welcome to AutoGuide's Affordable Sports Car Comparison, brought to you by WeatherTech. We'll get you back to that affordable sports car matchup soon enough, but first, we're going to take a few seconds to talk about protecting your own sporty car. WeatherTech offers complete protection for your vehicle's interior, especially ones like these. When it comes to sports cars, WeatherTech offers its classic floor liner for many models. Most work with your OE floor mat clips and protect up to the side of your footwell. And let's not forget the classic cargo liner, which is great for protecting your shiny new sports car from whatever you might need to toss into the trunk. All WeatherTech products come with a lifetime guarantee. You can order online at WeatherTech.ca, shipping is free. Or for those that are local, you can visit the retail showroom at 1164 Walker's Line in Burlington and get your order the same day.
Some say Miata is always the answer. And as somebody who lived with one for many years, driving it day in and day out through all types of weather, I once subscribed to that as well. But I'm here to give you a little dose of reality. While Kyle may tell you about all these wonderful situations where you can be driving lakeside with your hair blowing in the wind at sunset on your way to getting pizza, where I live here in Southern Ontario, you get about 15 minutes a year of proper conditions where you actually want to have the top down. The rest of the time, it's either too hot, too cold, too wet, or your driving companion has spent too much time on his or her hair. The good news is there's a whole lot more to love about the MX-5 than just going topless in it. What really makes it fun is just how alive it is. There's nothing else out there anywhere near the cost of this thing that is just so plugged in terms of its steering, in terms of the way that it just simply feels plugged into your spine, your nervous center. This car is brilliant fun to drive. Now look, I get it. This is the least powerful car in the group, and even though it's the lightest, it also means that it is the slowest. It doesn't have the outright grip that the Toyota and the Subaru do, so it's not going to go around a track quite as quick either. But I tell you, I don't care. Being out here on these back roads and just getting to play, that's basically what this car is all about. It's the harmonious nature in which all of the components here in the MX-5 work together. The throttle is crisp and responsive. The shifter it's just a work of art. You've got this little stubby knob here and the throws are really short, but they're super precise. Best of all though, because it doesn't have a ton of power, it means that you actually get to use the shifter a lot. You can sit there and play on public roads and go through 1, 2, 3, 4 gears without, risking losing your license for going so ridiculously fast. This is a car that's meant to play, and it does that exceptionally well. So despite this car's witness relocation paint that's about as exciting as wet newspaper, it's a really good, handsome design. We've got a lot of nice fluid lines to it that are complemented by some sharp creases. It's a design that we first saw a decade ago, and yet it seems to have aged really, really well. This car, of course, being a club spec, we've got the black mirrors and the black accents, but also the blacked out BBS wheels that just look so perfect on a Miata. It's a simple, clean design, unadorned by unnecessary fins or body skirts or vents or anything like that, and that's what's helped it age so well and will continue to make it look so good for years to come. That purity of design carries over to the interior as well, where it's extremely simple. The climate control, for instance, is comprised of 3 simple knobs. Now, it's manual control, and it kind of begs the question, would automatic climate control really be that much of a departure for the ethos of this car? I don't think so. Still, it works, even if the controls themselves look really chintzy and kind of cheap. And that's sort of the overall feeling in this car, is that it's effective. The one exception to the rule on the quality front here are these Recaro seats that feel fantastic, they're beautifully trimmed, and they fit you like a glove. Mazda has updated the infotainment system for 2024. It's now a wider screen and it's touchscreen functionality, which means you don't have to rely on the tedious rotary dial thing, but you still have to plug in if you want Apple CarPlay or Android Auto. The MX-5 may be the purest driving experience you can get in a new car these days, but it asks a lot of its owner. It's noisy, it's obviously windy, there's virtually no interior cubbies or spaces to put anything, and of course the trunk out back has virtually no room for anything other than a small carry-on bag.
Mini has redone basically its entire lineup for 2025, and that includes the classic 2-door, or as those of us in Canada and the rest of the world correctly call, the 3-door. Now, it's still just as totes adorbs as ever, but it's had a major improvement inside. We've always known that this generation was going to lose the manual transmission, but it should still be fun to drive, right? For starters, I mean, just look at this thing. Ocean Wave Green might not be for everyone, but we all dig it here, especially with the 18-inch alloys and bronzy highlights. Other models might be experimenting with squircle headlights, but the classic stays, well, classic. The rear does make a break from tradition with the triangle taillights, and furthermore, owners can pick from 3 different light signatures. Mini doesn't even charge a subscription fee to do it either. It feels weird to celebrate what should be an easy win, but hey, it's 2024. One interesting thing, considering Mini's march towards electrification, we heard numerous comments from passersby that the Cooper S looks like an EV. In a weird sort of way, it kind of drives like one. So the Cooper S maintains that much-loved B48 turbo 2-liter 4. Horsepower and torque are both up to 201 and 228 pound-feet respectively. A 7-speed dual-clutch transmission is once again a willing dance partner. Overall, it's a pretty responsive setup. Its shifts are of course plenty quick, but it's also pretty well behaved when you're just tootling around town. Also, despite being the heaviest car here, the Cooper S is quick. It's not, as I suspected before we actually did this comparison, the quickest car here, but it will keep pace with the Toyobarus in a sprint. And you know what? It even sounds pretty good. No, the problem with the Mini is that its driving experience is just one-dimensional. Sure, it's quick, and it has that eager puppy turn-in, with the over-thick steering wheel not exactly brimming with feedback, but at least it's accurate. It's just that those all-season tires give up pretty early, so the Mini driver is forced to back off, where the other cars are just finding their groove. Even working within the constraints of those limits, the Mini's fun enough to drive that it eggs you on to just get more involved, only you can't. Sure, a DCT is one thing, but getting rid of paddle shifters? In an S? You're basically left with 2 options. One, you can switch the experiences to go-kart mode. Hold on, wait for it. And that does tighten up responses a little bit, but it's not a replacement for driver control. Alternately, you can flick the world's smallest shifter down to L, but all that does is tell the DCT to hold one of its 7 gears for longer. The fact that the Mini isn't the sharpest drive here shouldn't come as a surprise, but like we keep hammering, fun can take many forms, and it's the cabin that really shines here. There's a satisfying knit texture all over the dashboard and doors, and the vegan leather seats could fool anybody. There are fun little toggle switches just as before, and at nighttime, you get ambient lighting beaming from behind that touchscreen. Oh yes, that touchscreen. While all the Japanese models have infotainment setups best described as archaic, the Mini goes ultra-modern here. It's all a little overwhelming at first, with a user interface that's a bit of a jumble, but spend some time with the screen and there's a lot of muscle behind the scenes. Only Mini could pull off something like the Experiences mode too. It tailors the driving mode and even all of the screens and themes and fonts to your pick, which is, well, just a lot of fun. Do I switch to go-kart mode just to hear the silly woohoo from time to time? Of course I do. Apple CarPlay is also included wirelessly, and yeah, it's a weird rectangle on a circle screen, but again, the level of personalization that Mini offers is just way above any other car here. And that's fun. And who remembers the last time a Mini hatchback had the most spacious backseat in a comparison? I don't need a shrink ray to fit back there, and this might be the only car on the market with a separate bit of glass in the rear, yet no back doors. The Mini is very nearly the most expensive tester here in American terms, and far and away the priciest in Canada. The closest equivalent US build would make it $38,295, a couple hundred below the Mazda, and about $2,500 richer than the most affordable model, which is the Toyota. Yet in Canada, it's $4,500 clear of the next priciest car and a whopping $11,000 more than the wicked good deal Subaru. That's a tough pill to swallow. Now the Mini does lag behind the others here in terms of driving fun, but that joyous cabin and the sense of quality makes it the sort of fun that doesn't require a winding road. Don't count this one out yet.
In this group, the Toyota and Subaru twins are a bit of the Goldilocks answer. They offer just enough day-to-day practicality to be worth driving as a daily driver, but also plug into the driver's nerve center when it comes to actually going down the road or the track. This is a beautiful car. The proportions are excellent. It's got the long front end on it, the short, tidy back end, and just enough flourish to the profile of it that really makes it stand out. Of course, the real magic about this car is when you're behind the wheel. With it weighing in at only 2,800 pounds, the thing is basically as heavy as the battery pack in most EVs. And given that it's so low, it means that when you're on nice, curvy, twisty roads like these ones, it's so flat and you can just dial it in so easily. This year, Subaru has sort of dialed it up a little bit further, particularly with this TS trim. They've added a set of Hitachi Astemo dampers to the front and retuned the back a little bit just to kind of tighten things up a little bit. What it means is, out here on the roads, you feel that it's just a little bit friskier than it was before, and quite frankly, it sort of feels now like the GR86 did in its more base trim. It's a little bit more tail happy. On the track, it means you can also theoretically get around a little bit quicker too. What we found though is that when asking too much of the car all at once, it does tend to upset the back end just a little bit more than we found in the Toyota. So if you're coming into a corner and braking really heavily and then perhaps just a little late getting off the brakes, it will just kind of hop around a little bit. Or if you're trying to turn and it's really rough pavement, same deal. It just feels a little bit unsettled in the back that we didn't notice in the Toyota. That said, the differences between the two are so microscopic that you really do have to drive them back to back before you even notice any of it. Oftentimes you'll hear people complaining on the internet about the BRZ just being underpowered, you know, that it needs more power, that it needs a turbo, all that sort of stuff. And sure, more power would always be fun, but the reality is this thing gets up in boogies pretty well. And the state of tune that's in the BRZ and the GR86 now it's strong, it's tractable. Like, you can really feel that it's got a good linear power curve throughout all of its rev range. If there's one complaint to be leveled against the drivetrain, it's that between shifts at moderate RPMs, there's still a considerable amount of rev hang that can make the shifts be a little less than perfectly smooth. If you really get on it, you really wind it out, it smooths out pretty well. It makes it a lot easier to drive it, but not everybody can do that all the time. So that'd be kind of the one criticism. The clutch action, good and light, fairly direct, no complaints there. And the shifter actually, it's a little notchy, but hey, compared to not having a stick shift at all, we will happily take one that's just a little notchy. The BRZ is a beautiful car. It's sleek, it's handsome, and amid a vast sea of crossovers, it's kind of a beacon of style that reminds us that as a population, we used to like to drive things that had a bit of sensuality to them. Because they're low and wide, I find my eye always drawn to them when I see them on the road, old ones and new. And this TS version here with its new deep blue paint, it just looks more premium than it really is. Generally, we like the look of the Toyota a little bit better. The front end just seems to be a little bit more sporty, a little bit edgier, and we always prefer that ducktail spoiler on the back end of the Toyota. But in this comparison, the BRZ with its beautiful blue paint, the gold Brembos, it just kind of feels like the grown-up's choice out of this pair. The Toyota, slathered in stickers, seems like it's the car for somebody that never really grew up. Inside, the BRZ is not quite so premium as its exterior would lead you to believe. Mostly it's full of black plastic that makes it look kind of chintzy and pretty plain. The seats, however, are really comfortable, really supportive, and all the controls are laid out in such a way that you get the sense that this is a car that's meant to be driven. The only real flourishes here are that you get some splashes of blue trim in a few spots, as opposed to the Toyota that gets flashier red ones. You get a nice big red STI start button and a different shift knob. Otherwise, it's exactly the same as the GR86. The BRZ's infotainment system is also a little out of date. The screen is quite dull, it's small, and sometimes it's not as responsive as you'd like it to be.
You could argue that the Toyota GR86 is already something of an old school machine. It's front engine, rear drive, naturally aspirated, and manual transmission. For 2024, Toyota is leaning into that heritage with this, the Terreno edition. It's time to live out some tofu delivery dreams. Now, I'm not going to go into too much detail about the powertrain in the Toyota because, well, you already kind of heard it from Jeff. I will say that those people who seem to think that this still doesn't have enough power are kind of missing the point. Yes, the 2.4-liter Boxer 4 is a little rattly down low, and yeah, the rev hang is noticeable under 3,000 RPM. The added displacement of this 2.4-liter makes it downright pleasant to daily drive. The clutch and the shifter can't match that perfect unity that we find in the Mazda, but it's suitably mechanical and friendly. Now obviously the Toyobarus do drive pretty similarly. They both have the Brembos, which really add to driver confidence with its immense stopping power, and they both have the same sweet front-rear balance that you expect from a front-engine rear-drive car. Now in the regular trims, the Toyota is the slightly more tail-happy of the two, and that mostly has to do with a different rear sway bar mounting. But for the Terreno edition, Toyota has added Sachs dampers to the setup, and it really results in excellent body control, handling secondary body movements just that bit much better than the Subaru. It's not something that you'd really notice or miss if you weren't driving them back to back, but well, that's kind of why we're doing this, right? It's not exactly subtle, is it? The Terreno edition douses the GR86 in gratuitous amounts of flat black. I'm not entirely sold on it, especially the side stripes, but viewed from the rearview mirror of any of the other cars here as it harries their rear bumper, the 86 does look pretty cool. That ducktail spoiler earns it extra kudos from all of us over the subtle Subi too. A smattering of Terreno badges lets everyone know you've got something rare. Just 860 of them in the US and 50 in Canada. Now I could just tell you that this is the same interior you just saw with Jeff, but that's not true at all. In this one, the highlights are red. The Toyobarus split the difference between the anti-social cabin accommodations in the Miata and the big-time party space you find in the Mini. Toyota took retro inspiration to another level for the GR86's cabin. While it was heralded as a solid step forward when this second-generation model debuted a few years ago, the cockpit just feels dated now. It does what it needs to without fuss, but nobody is going to look back fondly on it. The seats are comfortable and offer more adjustment than the admittedly more supportive Recaros in the Mazda. And yeah, you can fit people in the back of this, as long as you don't really like them. That Subaru-based infotainment is the same sort of story. It gets the job done, but oh boy, it sure ain't pretty. Toyota will also talk about its premium 8-speaker sound system, but honestly, meh. Not that safety is exactly a major buying consideration in this segment, but it's important to point out that the manual Toyota and Subaru both pick up additional driver assists for 2024. In America, the Toyota is the value play of this quartet, coming in just a bit under $36,000, which is one heck of a deal for something so dialed in. Canadian pricing is a tenner over $41,000 all in. It isn't exactly low-key, but the Toyota has a few key upgrades that really elevate the driving experience. It strikes an ideal middle ground in this quartet, but is that enough for it to win? That's all 4 cars sorted, so we're going to gather everything back together here for the results.
Kyle, it looks like you've got the scores there.
It's true, I do. We have driven these cars in the sun, in the rain, on highways, on back roads. We've thoroughly evaluated them, and we're left with a bit of a surprise. We have a tie for last place, or third place, depending on how you look at it, in the Mini and the Mazda. Now, the Mini just couldn't overcome its huge price disadvantage, and it's just not that fun to drive. That being said, it is the most fun to sit in.
Yeah, I wouldn't even necessarily agree that it's not that fun to drive. It is, it's just that it's more about making a fashion statement and more about just the experience of being in this character of a car. And then of course we've got the MX-5, which is the polar opposite, where it asks a lot of compromises of its owner, but it's incredibly fun to drive.
So good. But if you want to have less compromise and still have a really good driving experience, you can have our second place finisher, the GR86.
Oh, so the Toyota, even though we liked it better for its driving, still doesn't get the top spot.
It's true, it's true. It was our favorite for that, but it just can't overcome its siblings' price advantage, making the winner the Subaru BRZ TS.
No surprise, it's the bargain of the group, and it's still really, really good to drive. In fact, not since last year's hot hatch comparison test has there been such a perfect example of everyone's a winner than this.
It's true, and just like numbers don't really matter, like 0 to 60 time or top speed with this quartet, this is just one way to score this. You could have your own scorecard and your own priorities that would result in a different finishing order. For example, we all agreed that on a perfect day like today, the Mazda is the most fun to drive, so on that note, I'm gonna see you guys later.